Chapter 3. The Silken Invasion. Liam woke to a world transformed. What had once been his sparse, cluttered basement apartment now resembled something from a fever dream. Delicate webs stretched across every surface, not the random dusty cobwebs he was used to finding in corners, but intricate, purposeful constructions that caught the morning light filtering through his window and transformed it into something ethereal. The webs were everywhere. They draped from ceiling to floor in gossamer curtains, stretched between furniture like silver bridges, and cascaded down the walls in patterns so complex they seemed almost architectural, as if someone had redesigned his living space with silk as their medium. "What the hell?" Liam breathed, his voice hoarse with sleep. He sat up on his couch. When had he moved from his desk to the couch? And immediately noticed that the bite on his hand had changed again overnight. The dark veins now extended past his shoulder, creeping across his chest in delicate web-like patterns that mirrored the silk surrounding him. But there was no pain, only that familiar numbness that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Beautiful, isn't it?" whispered the voice in his mind. "A gift just for you." Liam stood carefully, ducking under a particularly elaborate web that spanned from his bookshelf to the ceiling light fixture. The silk was stronger than it looked. When he accidentally brushed against one strand, it held firm, vibrating like a guitar string and sending a resonant hum through the entire network. The sound was oddly musical, almost like a lullaby. He needed to get rid of this. Whatever was happening to him, whatever had invaded his apartment while he slept, it wasn't natural, wasn't safe. He grabbed a broom from his tiny closet and began to sweep at the nearest web. The moment the bristles touched the silk, something extraordinary happened. The web didn't simply tear or collapse. It seemed to dissolve at his touch, melting away like cotton candy in water. But instead of disappearing entirely, the dissolved silk reformed itself around the broom handle, coating it in a thin layer of silver that pulsed with that same inner light he'd seen at his window. More importantly, as he worked to clear the webs, Liam felt something he hadn't experienced in years: purpose. Each sweep of the broom, each cleared section of wall or furniture, gave him a small sense of accomplishment. For the first time since the accident, he was actually doing something, taking action instead of simply existing in his self-imposed tomb. The work was oddly satisfying, meditative even. The rhythmic motion of sweeping, the way the silk dissolved and reformed, the gradual revelation of his familiar furniture beneath the gossamer veil, it all felt like a ritual of reclamation. "See how good it feels to have something to care for?" The voice murmured approvingly. "To have a reason to wake up each day?" The afternoon, Leon had cleared most of the apartment. His arms ached, a good ache, the kind that came from honest work rather than the bona-dip weariness of depression. He'd even managed to eat something more substantial than leftover pizza, a sandwich made from actual ingredients he'd found in his mostly empty refrigerator. But his victory was short-lived. When he woke the next morning, the webs had returned. Not just returned, they were thicker, more elaborate, and somehow stronger. Where yesterday's silk had dissolved at his touch, today's held firm. The broom that had been so effective before now struggled to tear through even the finest strands. "They're learning," he realized with a mixture of fascination and growing unease. "Whatever's making these, it's adapting." The pattern repeated over the following days. Each morning brought a fresh invasion of silk, each iteration more complex and resilient than the last. What had started as delicate decorations now resembled architectural modifications to his living space. The webs didn't just span between existing surfaces, they created new ones, forming silvery walls and chambers that divided his apartment into strange cocoon-like rooms. And still, the cleaning gave him purpose. Even as the task became more difficult, even as he had to use knives and scissors to cut through the increasingly robust silk, Liam found himself looking forward to each day's battle against the invasion. It was something to do, something to focus on besides the endless loop of guilt and grief that had defined his existence for 3 years. "You're getting stronger," the voice observed as he worked. More focused, more alive, it was true. The daily routine of clearing webs had given him a structure he hadn't realized he'd been missing. He was eating more regularly, sleeping better, when he could sleep between the constant sound of scratching in the walls. The dark veins from his spider bite had spread across most of his torso now, but they seemed to pulse with energy rather than decay. On the fourth morning, everything changed. Len woke to find his apartment so thoroughly encased in silk that it took him several minutes to locate the light switch. The webs had grown not just thicker but more sophisticated, forming tunnel-like passages that led from room to room. Some areas were so densely woven that they blocked out the light entirely, creating pockets of perfect darkness within his underground home. But it was what he found in the kitchen that made his blood run cold. Suspended in the center of an intricate web that spanned from counter to ceiling was a small bundle, perfectly wrapped in silver silk. At first glance, it looked like just another formation, another architectural element in the ongoing transformation of his space. But as Lamb moved closer, he could make out the shape within the wrapping. Wings, a tiny beak, the delicate curve of what had once been a living creature. A bird, a small sparrow, by the look of it, cocooned so perfectly that every feather was preserved in exquisite detail. Its eyes were closed, its body positioned as if it had simply fallen asleep mid-flight and been gently caught by caring hands. Liam reached out to touch the silk-wrapped corpse, then jerked his hand back as if burned. This wasn't random. This wasn't some accident where a bird had gotten trapped in a web. The positioning was too deliberate, too careful. Too much like a gift or a trophy. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice whispered, and for the first time, Liam detected something in his tone that made his skin crawl. A possessive satisfaction. Perfect preservation. No more pain. No more struggle. Just eternal peace. What are you? Liam whispered to the empty apartment. The scratching in the walls intensified, coming from every direction now. Not mice, not settling wood or creaking pipes. Something much larger, moving with purpose through spaces that shouldn't exist. Something that had been watching him clean its webs every day. Something that had been testing his reactions, measuring his responses, learning his patterns. Something that had been preparing the bite on his hand throbbed, and the dark veins across his chest pulsed in response. Liam looked down at himself and realized with growing horror that the patterns under his skin weren't random. They formed the same intricate designs as the webs surrounding him, as if whatever was creating the silk prison was also rewriting him from the inside out. You don't have to be afraid, the voice soothed. You've seen how peaceful it can be. How beautiful! The little bird understands now. No more hunger, no more fear of predators. Just endless, perfect rest. Layham backed away from the cocooned sparrow, his Newtown sense of purpose crumbling into ash. This wasn't about giving him something to do, something to care for. This was about preparation, about making him comfortable, compliant, ready for whatever came next. The webs around him seemed to pulse with anticipation, and somewhere in the walls, something large shifted its weight. Waiting patient, soon it would be his turn in the silk. Soon he would join the sparrow in its perfect, eternal rest. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, and Liam realized with crystalline clarity that his time was running out. Whatever had been building this prison around him was nearly ready to complete its work, and he had helped it every step of the way, clearing paths, learning its patterns, becoming exactly what it needed him to be, the perfect prey.